So I have just a few things to say about this this chapter, which we're mainly going to be focusing on today, The Shadow of the Past.
Which I got a bone to pick with the author of this book.
Okay.
I don't like. Why did they take the name of one of the greatest episodes from the Rings of Power? And
but we're not here to talk about Rings of Power. Sorry. Okay, I won't do it anymore.
It never gets old.
Okay, I guess not. But no, but I was going to say about this chapter, it's shite. No, it's not shite. But
no.
But we can have just kind of we don't have to stick to the chapter necessarily. We could have a kind of a wide-ranging, cozy discussion about.
Basically, this whole.
But did you have anything to introduce the conversation for today, or go ahead?
Not really. Next week,
pressure's on.
Next week is going to be wonderful.
Oh yeah, we might have a guest next week. I think we know him as PB and Jason, but I don't know.
Oh yeah, Actually, he does go by PB and Jason.
Yeah. Okay. So we might be joined by PB and Jason.
Right.
A fun guy.
He's a
fun guy. He's like an amoeba or a fungi. Yeah.
Right.
Dad jokes in the house.
Wonderful sense of humor.
You're a fun guy. You're like a toadstool.
Hey. No,
we haven't gotten a shortcut to mushrooms yet, so we'll save that joke for another day.
I know. Here's the one thing I did notice about this whole thing, and it's weird because, again, reading the chapters the way that we have, I noticed that Gandalf is starting to have suspicions of Saurman right now.
Right. Fairly early.
He's not. It doesn't seem like he hasn't been captured yet, because that was like when they were going to Bree. But he foreshadowed the shit out of the
reference to Saruman in Shadow of the Past did strike me too as something like, he talks about Saruman, and he gives us reason to be suspicious of Saruman even early on. And I guess I never noticed that before, but what struck me is, of course, and I almost put myself, since I'm reading this again for the first time in many, many years, while I'm reading it, I'm kind of remembering myself reading it from when I was very young and thinking, so in a way it's like, because it's been so long, I feel like I'm in a sense reading it for the first time, and I'm imagining like, ooh, what did my 13-year-old brain think when reading this for the first time? Because in a sense, I'm rereading it for the first time, if that makes sense.
Right.
And of course, the name Saruman, because I had not read it yet and I didn't know the story, it went straight over my head.
Yeah.
Because you don't know who this person is. It's just a random name. But real quick, reading it now reading it anew, it made me think like, and speaking of the title of our series, Speculative Tolkienism, I ask you, Two Sheds, what if instead of the name Saruman, Tolkien had landed on the name Greg for that character?
Greg,
I don't know, or just some name. The thing is like, don't you think by calling him Saruman, he's going to end up being kind of like a Sauron character? Like those names are so similar.
A little bit, yeah. They're very
bit,
similar.
yeah. a bit, yes.
A bit. He hasn't got a what?
What do you think? I was like, Saruman.
Well, can you build a bridge
for
out
an
of
uninformed? We could build a bridge out of her for the uninformed, the neophyte who's just turning himself, getting turned on to Tolkien.
Yeah, okay.
He would probably get those names confused, like Saruman, Sauron.
Yeah.
They're almost interchangeable.
Hey, interesting fact. So in the Ralph Bakshi version of Lord of the Rings, they called Saruman Arrowman because they did feel like that they would get confused.
I think I do remember that.
And
but if they call him Arrowman, then they're going to get him confused with Aragorn.
Right, but they went back to Saruman, but there's a few lines where you can hear him say Arrowman, because I remember thinking, like, that's weird when I was a kid, you know.
Interesting.
And, yeah,
Interesting.
yeah. And you can hear it. You can hear it for sure, like when Frodo's staring into the mirror of Galadriel, right? And he's like, "Oh, it's Gandalf." No, it's in white. It must be Arrowman. And then he started like, and then Galadriel was like, "Do not touch the water," and then said, "I am the Tempest." No, she didn't say that.
Yeah, but the name Arrowman, you know, I know this is a tangent, but like it would be an odd choice too, just because it sounds like Aragorn, but also like Arrowman, like he's an archer of some kind, or Aroma,
yeah, it was weird.
Like,
yeah, I don't know the reason. The only reason that I know that they chose that name was to not get him confused with Sauron,
right?
But they never gave a reason why they landed on Arrowman,
right?
As with the Saruman, like I don't know how to say Saruman, because I used to say Saruman, right? And then Saruman, you know, and I still feel weird, like saying Saruman and Sauron, you know, because of Sauron.
You say Saruman?
It was Saruman, right?
Yeah, I just say Saruman.
Saruman. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But I used to say Saruman, like an SU.
Oh, really?
Like back when I was a kid, and it just kind of stuck with me the whole time. And Sauron, you know, Sauron, and now you know, and this whole pronunciation thing of the movies, and like, because you read the word and you pronounce it a certain way in your head, you know, and then you hear it and it's reinforced, because like it used to be like Balin in the 70s, and then I heard Balin, and that was back to Balin again, and it's like, you know, it's like, what the shit, man, this. Anyway, sorry.
Right.
So that was a weird left turn right there.
No. It's a bit of a left turn, but I don't mind. Like, yeah, I'm like that too. I like to pronounce things correctly usually, but sometimes I just get so set in my ways with the pronunciation I've always used. I mean, main case in point is Tolkien. I always have said Tolkien, and of course it's supposed to be Tolkien or something, and they emphasize the "een." But I think Tolkien's close enough, and that's just how I say his name.
I know, but
I mean, I could say Tolkien, and it's to me, it's kind of the distinction's quite subtle. And
dude, you know what it is too? It's like the difference between Han Solo and Han Solo. You know what I'm talking about?
Right? Is one correct?
It's supposed to be Han Solo, but like we always used to say Han Solo. You know, and
right?
It's like
will hardcore Star Wars people like look down
because
upon
you have the out for Han Solo, because Lando Calrissian said Han, and that was like the thing that Billy D. Williams used to.
Right. Well, maybe it was his like Skyworld dialect or whatever he was from. Cloud Colony.
Yeah.
Where did
Bespin,
he live?
The Cloud City of Bespin. So,
right. That was his own special dialect.
Right. Can I get a check for my nerd? My nerd badge. There.
Yeah, Tolkien. I think himself was anyone who studies language is very forgiving, because part of the thing you study when you study languages, it's morphologies, and it's the ways it changes, the way language changes through time and in space. Like, this region over here and this region over there. He studied Anglo-Saxon, and Anglo-Saxon itself. Old English, sorry, the language Old English of the Anglo-Saxon tribes. People make that a distinction, like, there is no language Anglo-Saxon. There's the tribe Anglo-Saxon. They speak Old English. But I studied Old English in college.
Hold on. Can I sidebar this real quick?
Yes.
Can you imagine? Oh, young Ronald, what are you going to study in university? I'm going to study Old English. So you bastard. That is a useless major.
Wait, who Tolkien's mom?
Tolkien's mom or his dad.
Or
I
no,
don't know, right?
she was dead, so it would have been like his guardian,
Yeah,
Father
his
Francis or
guardian.
whatever.
Yeah. Why did you study bricklaying? Useful.
Oh right.
You can join the Masons.
Gotta walk down at the mill.
Yeah.
The
Come with the mill.
crossbeam's out of skill on the treadle.
You'll know nothing about.
Anyway, but
mines.
real quick, just to finish my point,
sorry.
if you don't
Sorry,
mind.
Okay.
So, as a scholar of Old English, Tolkien knew and would have known that there was no proper. I mean, there were proper pronunciations of Old English words depending on what part of England you were in, as it is even today, like with modern English. So, if you were studying the Wessex dialect of Anglo-Saxon, you could read, like, for instance, just because I relish this opportunity, I'm going to speak some Old English. So,
why don't you
like, for
flex
instance,
a little bit.
in Wessex, I'm just making this up, but you would say something like, "What it swevnikist sejan will, what yet yamata to midra nicht sitten railroad bear and the rasta wunadon," which is the first few lines of the Dream of the Rood. I think, yes.
I thought you were speaking the black speech.
The black speech, yeah. Yes, that was the language that Gandalf didn't want to speak in the room of Bag End. Yeah, but if I were speaking like Essex or a Sussex dialect, it would sound like, "What it swevnikist." No, I'm just kidding. You didn't laugh. It would sound like.
I'm like, no. I'm lagging. Right. Oh, hold on.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. Just give me I'm lagging really hard.
Oh, really?
Like, as far as
what you hear of my end. Okay.
Yeah.
It looks good on my side.
Catch up. I like.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so all that Old English stuff was simply to say that when you study language, I think you become very forgiving about pronunciation, and so people aren't as like strict and regimented about, no, it must be pronounced this way. I actually don't know whether Tolkien ever expressed that view, but I imagine that because he knew that people pronounce things differently depending on when and where they lived, and me as an American, or being an ignorant fool, I could say Tolkien instead of Tolkien, and he probably wouldn't care.
No, that's good.
Right. We're probably going to get hate mail for that one.
Yeah, I know. Look.
Give us a break. We're
speculative. We're just speculating.
Speculative. Remember.
Yes. We're making shit up.
Exactly. Do you think? So my point, I guess, is like the serious point is: do you think Tolkien, being the linguist and the scholar that he was, that he knew? See, I think most authors would, when you're writing a story, people who coach first-time authors, they say, make sure your characters have very distinct names so people don't get them confused.
Like Fred.
You know what I mean? So you don't want to name two characters like, Robin and Robert, or something like that, because they won't be distinct enough.
Again, unless it's intentional,
But that's my point. Like, do you think it was intentional on Tolkien's part? Like, I'm going to name them, kind of have similar names, because in the long run they will form an alliance of some kind.
Let me ask you this, because Tolkien was more scholarly and less authorly, right? I mean, is that? I don't know. That's another interesting question to propose, because in one way, reading his biography, I always got the sense that he saw his duties, teaching at Oxford or whatever. I think he probably considered himself a professor first and foremost, and not an author.
As far as his professional life went, but I also got the sense that he saw his duties grading papers or whatnot as like just something he had to get through so that he could work on what he really was interested in his life, which is working on his myth.
Okay, so let me
on his legendarium.
Let me rephrase though. So like nowadays, like say Stephen King, right? I'm lagging.
Oh no, I don't see it.
Have I caught up?
You look good now. Yeah.
Okay. So like Stephen King, like studied English, and he was an English teacher, but he like was writing. He had creative writing courses, and it was like it was all about learning how to write. Whereas Tolkien, he didn't. He studied language. He did. Did he? I mean, again, I haven't dug.
Well, this is
deep.
interesting. Yeah. It's like one of those things. Like, for instance, I don't know how far we want to go into this, but like, I never wanted to take like creative writing courses,
Right?
even though I have interest in being a creative writer myself, as it were, because I felt like it's like I kept that separate from my school studies. I have a training in English literature, but it's like more like studying English literature. But I don't.
How long did it take you to learn the language when?
No, but like, okay. So what you're saying is, yeah, Tolkien. I don't think he saw himself as, although he was a successful published author ever since he published The Hobbit. So for a good part of his adult life, but it still wasn't his. I don't think he saw it. He saw himself as a professional author. He was a professional scholar who had a successful book.
Right. So here's my question now to come full circle.
Okay.
Do you, like, as a linguist, he probably did intentionally do that, but he probably just did it as a linguist, not as a literary device that he was aware of.
Right. And I think this gets to the point. Like, Tolkien, I think one of his charms is that he does a lot of things that, a lot of people, like, if he were the sad thing to think about is that if a young Tolkien was taking a freshman creative writing course in college, the professor would probably be like,
wrong.
Saruman and Sauron, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah. Oh, so we got a scholar, an author in the room, eh?
Well, look, he's there. He's Bill Shakespeare.
Hold on, dude, hold on.
You know, like my Chris Farley?
What was that? Is that from Bill and Ted's Excellent
Adventure? No. It's Chris Farley, where he's like the motivational speaker.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's like,
we got a writer.
He's like, my son's smoking doobie.
I know. Oh, young Tolkien, you're drinking a pint down at the whatever. I don't know. I don't know what.
Anyway,
what
so the point
20s.
I guess to make is that Tolkien broke a lot of kind of what quote unquote rules, but I think obviously that is a good thing because what he wrote retains a charm of a person who's not a professional, writer. He didn't see him. I don't think he saw himself as such, although he's, obviously gifted,
Right.
It wasn't his bread and butter.
But again, like here's the thing too. And a lot of this is like Tolkien's work, Tolkien's writing, is very charming and great. Right. But it reminds me in some ways of his paintings that he uses to illustrate, where there's something about it. There's it's not correct, but there's something there that is just crap.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
No, there's a childlike innocence. I kind of don't like to use that term for want of a better expression or a better term. It's like a childlike innocence. Because I don't want to give credence to that. I
don't want to give kids any more credit because
there's that whole movement
dumb up until they were like
right.
21. No,
right. There's that whole outsider artist movement that's like Daniel Johnston and stuff like that, and people that I like, but certain people like Billy Childish, I think, or even our great friend Tracy Emin might take it too far, as they almost revel in the fact that they are doing art that is childlike, it's just scribbles. And I don't think Tolkien was that kind of outsider.
No,
you know what I mean? He was an outsider, but not he didn't revel in the scribble. In fact, he almost went the opposite direction. actually, I was going to bring this in, if you don't mind, because it relates to.
Sure.
Let's get into. I want to draw in a few texts, but first, I want to talk about Shadow of the Past.
Okay, perfect.
And compare it to something. So, in the shadow,
why, why else would we be here?
Why else would we be here?
I know.
Are you kidding me? So, so as we get into Shadow of the Past, it first starts out that a kind of a thesis that we were developing last time about Tolkien's interest in starting this quest off small and in the mundane realm of like the garden, potatoes and tomatoes and clipping the hedge and all this really mundane, like almost garden level, almost vegetable level stuff, concerns of hobbits.
Okay.
Shadow of the Past starts off with some, again, kind of gossip between Sam and Ted Sandyman, right?
Yeah.
But it also talks about Frodo saying that he found himself wondering at times, especially in the autumn, about the wild lands and strange visions of mountains that he had never seen came into his dreams. He began to say to himself, perhaps I shall cross the river myself one day, to which the other half of his mind always replied, not yet. One, there's this romance that I have to point out of the autumn and how one gets restless in the autumn. Yeah. And I know that you're that way too. And he's also approaching like his 50th year. He's approaching middle age. And there's this little romance of like the autumn comes and there's that feeling of like wanting to go explore. It makes you think like, is there more to life than just the daily routine and the rut that I have like kind of rutted out in my daily existence?
And the answer to that is YouTube.
Right. And the answer is YouTube. So here we see Frodo kind of wondering what's on the borders of the Shire, right? And especially in the autumn when he gets kind of this wanderlust. And he looked at maps and wondered what lay beyond their edges. Maps made in the Shire showed mostly white spaces beyond its borders.
Yeah.
And he took to wandering further afield, more often by himself, and Merry and his other friends watched him anxiously. So
that was weird, though.
Oh, go ahead.
The fact that Merry and Sam and Pippin, right, and like to a lesser degree Fatty
Bulger,
watched him. They had no reason to watch him. That's like the one thing that I noticed. It's like there's like a lot of hints, right? That like you know, to jump chapters where Sam was spying on Frodo because they're afraid they were going to up and leave at the Shire. But like, why was he spying on Frodo? You know what I'm talking about? Like I don't see it so much as spying. Like here, to me, I always thought it just meant like if you have a friend that's like an alcoholic or something, right?
You're like, oh, there they go again to get more alcohol or whatever.
Okay,
like
so,
it's more like, oh, it's that level of concern. Like I'm seeing this person go off again.
Actually, maybe it's like it is 50, and they're like, oh, Bilbo did this, and this dude is
maybe that
like
too.
Bilbo.
Rumor has it Bilbo was just like this, and look what trouble he found. And so I'm worried that Frodo's going to follow in his footsteps. Now, back to what I was saying. So when I was talking about how Frodo seemed to be interested in the borders of the Shire, and he started to wander beyond them, and he started focusing on the white spaces beyond the map, where the map ends, where the maps of the Shire ends, and there was like nothingness beyond. That is, I noticed that when rereading this chapter, because it struck me, because I know Tolkien was really into this idea of the beyond, the romance of the beyond, and the romance of distance.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about? And I just said I used a two-shedsism. Do you hear me?
No,
I said, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, dude, yeah. I'm sorry.
I said, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I didn't even notice that because I'm like, yes, I know what you're talking about.
I'm turning into you.
I know.
No, but okay. So
all that years and treasure
you're finally
spent
rubbing
in
off
school.
on me.
Right. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that Tolkien was really into this idea of distance and how when there is this sense of distance, like distant mountains, that was like so evocative and romantic for him, and he always wanted to explore that distance. Like he sees distant mountains, they have like this purple mist around them, and he's really wondering like what could possibly be like hidden in that purple mist or whatever.
What kind of food is up there?
What kind of food is up there? But he also expressed that whenever he expressed a disappointment that whenever he went to try to reach those distances, by going there, they kind of lost some of their charm and they lost some of their enchanting quality, and they became mere surroundings.
Right.
So, and I always really liked that he noticed that and that he liked to describe it. And I think this idea, like beyond the borders, it's mysterious, and you actually can't go there because as soon as you get there, it becomes you become disenchanted by that distance, because the distance has been traversed, and then it becomes mere surroundings.
You don't think about it, but it makes sense because I mean, and that can kind of like probably go for anything, like
right,
like, like to use an analogy, like you see that new guitar, right? That like, man, I gotta buy that guitar, bro, and then you get it, it's like, yeah, okay, it's kind of sucks.
It is totally like that. Like people who are shopaholics or who have this need to, like, they see something in a store, it's not theirs, they desire it, and as soon as you acquire that thing that's desired, it becomes yours, and so it loses some of that luster. It loses.
Yeah, it's like the mundane,
Yeah, it's like,
it's like,
yeah, that happens to me all the time where I'm like, oh, I gotta have that.
What?
And then,
in a weird way, it's like I've been at some gigs, right, where I'm running sound and it is painful to watch these bands, right? It's absolutely painful, and it's like no one's into it. People are booing, blah 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 blah.
Really, people are booing.
Well, not booing, but they're like walking out.
Okay.
I mean, it's a casino. I mean, what are you gonna do,
right.
But those are the best stories to tell. You know what I'm saying? After the fact.
If Tolkien wrote Chapter 2, Lord of the Rings, the Dark Lord sits on his throne and, rubs his hands together and he's ready to scheme his way in, where Sauron becomes a character, it would have ruined that majesty, because I think that the reason that this novel is the reason Lord of the Rings is effective in one sense is because Sauron is always in the distance, so he's kind of
right. Well, it's the imagination. Like your imagination will make things.
It fills in the gaps.
Scarier. Yeah, it fills in the gaps, and oftentimes for the worst. Because, really, Sauron is never really described. I mean, and like he's walking around, and like the Eye of Sauron was kind of like there, and it was more of a metaphorically speaking, right? I mean, it wasn't like, like he could see stuff, but it wasn't. I mean, and again, like having like the eye on the top of Barad-dûr, like staring around everything. That's like a really cool visual, and it's like, oh, look at that, but. I don't know if they ever really like Tolkien ever really described that per se, right?
Right. So like if there had been a scene kind of like from Time Bandits where the Dark Lord is actually in the room with us saying like, right, and then his servants is like, we could turn beans
computers day one.
We could turn beans into peas, master.
Oh, Robert.
Anyway, but yeah, I think that it just gives it that air of mystery, the fact that Sauron's always
but it makes it way scarier. Yeah. And again,
just more menacing. Like a menacing quality.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
But then again, though, that's what made the elves way cooler in the book and not on Rings of Power. because like there is that air of mystery around him. Like
Right.
you like your imagination fills in the gaps,
Yeah.
and that's
right. Yeah, that's
and
right.
that was intentional. That was intentional from Tolkien.
Yes. Can I just give, since I have Leaf
Sure.
by Niggle up here, and I just wanted to say, this is obviously not one of his most famous works, Leaf by Niggle, but have you ever read Leaf by
Yeah.
Niggle? Yeah. It's more of, he hated allegory,
Yes,
but
you
I
gave
kind
it
of,
to me.
but I kind of see it as kind of an allegory for the act of artistic creation.
Hello.
I'm doing
got a
this.
nice
I'm doing this
little-
just for the shock value.
Got a nice little pipey pipe. Hello.
Kids are asleep. Wife out of town. I'm smoking now. No, I don't usually
It's
smoke.
pipe weed. It's pipe weed.
This is just
Hey,
for
bro.
this is just for the ambiance.
For the scholarly.
I haven't smoked this in months.
Right.
Anyway,
It's not marijuana. It's pipe weed.
pipe weed.
It's old Toby.
It's old Toby. Anyway, it's long bottom leaf.
Long bottom leaf. That's my favorite.
Anyway, so oh yeah, so Niggle's trying to paint an entire tree and he can't because it's like his desire to make the level of detail that he wants can't ever be realized because he lives in a real world with other obligations. He has to, go to work and, do all the duties of his daily life.
Yeah.
So those kind of intrude on his ability to actually create the tree that he's always wanted to create, right? But then he goes on a journey which has to be some kind of analogy for death, right? That's how I see it.
Right.
So when he
Yes.
dies, he goes into quote unquote, Leaf by Niggle heaven, which
Right.
he sees his tree that he's always wanted to work on. He went on looking at his tree, and the leaves, all the leaves he had ever labored at were there, as he had imagined them rather than as he had made them. And there were others that had only budded in his mind, and many that might have budded if he only had had the time. Nothing was written on them. They were just exquisite leaves, yet they were dated as clear as a calendar. So it's like
Right.
Tolkien felt like he was, in writing his stories, he was following this idea that existed almost out in space or in the conceptual realm. And, had he had the time, he would have written the stories of the Second Age with the level of detail that he wrote the stories of the Third Age. You know what I mean? Like he would have been able to, had he had the time, and if he didn't have the duties of teaching or just family duties. Not that we can't really complain because one human can only do so
Luckily
much.
for Tolkien, Amazon's here to fill in those gaps.
So one more thing, sorry. So remember when I said about
No.
the distances? So this is
Yeah.
Niggle, and after he looks at his tree, again, he's dead basically, and he's in heaven.
Right.
So he's in the spiritualized realm of artistic creation, like almost the Jungian collective unconscious, as it were. As he walked away, he discovered
I was just talking the other day with guys at work about the Jungian level of
the collective unconscious.
subconscious.
So he goes past the tree and he goes to see the mountains. As he walked away, he discovered an odd thing. He discovers the forest and the mountains.
Right.
He discovers an odd thing. The forest, of course, was a distant forest, yet he could approach it, even enter it, without it losing that particular charm. He had never before been able to walk into the distance without turning it into mere surroundings. So, like in the real world, if you try to walk into the distance that from a distance has a kind of a magic quality to it,
Yeah.
like you said, when we get there, it becomes mere surroundings and it loses that charm. But he imagines like almost in the heavenly realm of the beyond. He hopes Tolkien almost hopes that or at least through Niggle, his hope is, or he's describing a situation where you can actually go into the distance and it still retains the charming quality of distance, but you can enter that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just really interesting.
In a way, he probably used this as speculating for Lothlorien and probably Rivendell. Where it's like, these are in the distance, but here we are, and it's magical.
I think all of Middle Earth is like that. In the real world, the distance loses enchantment when you go into it. Tolkien wanted one of the ways that Middle Earth was so enchanting is that he wanted to cast a spell of enchantment over a place that you can enter.
Right.
It retains that sense of enchantment even though you can go into it.
But that's from like the reader's standpoint. But from a character standpoint, like the Shire is probably like, oh, these people are stupid. Like, look at all these dumbass hobbits. You know what I'm saying?